Today I'm driving the new Tiguan, Volkswagen Tiguan ALLSPACE 4Motion 2-liter TSI Highline. It's a mouthful. It really is a big mouthful. Um, but it's Volkswagen's Tiguan, and the ALLSPACE just means that it's got two extra seats right at the back. It's a 2-liter TSI, not the TDI, so it's petrol, not diesel. And the Highline just means that, well, it's got all the fancy bits in it. Pricing comes in at about 600 grand, as this one is without any optional extras, which is not bad for a car with as much as this car comes with. It does come with a couple of optional extras. I'm going to run through those with you really quickly. It's got metallic paint. This one is called Platinum Gray. It's got a detachable tow bar at the back, so if you need a tow bar, you press a button on the boot, it electronically flips out, and then when you no longer need it, you flip it back in, and it's sort of out of the way, which is quite cool. It's got an active head-up display, which is a little screen that actually slides up and down sort of above the center binnacle here. There's a button on the side here. You press, it moves up, and then you can adjust it in different height. And you can see stuff on there if you're not wearing sunglasses. If you're wearing polarized sunglasses, it's practically invisible. Got a panoramic sunroof. You pay extra for that. There's sort of a curtain thing that slides over the sunroof. So if you want to block the sun out, it's there. Only the front half of the sunroof opens though, so if you sort of want air in it, you can't open the whole thing. You can only open the front half. It's quite big though, which is nice. Got Vienna leather seats. No, they're not made from Viennas, but they're quite comfortable. They feel quite soft and relatively nice to sit on. This one's got the upgraded touch screen. So instead of the 7-inch that comes standard with these cars, it's got a 9.2-inch, which, if you think about it, that's the size of an iPad. It's got a 9.2-inch touch screen. The touch is really good. It's responsive. It's accurate, which is great when you're driving, so you're not sort of fumbling around on the screen in front of you. Something that comes as part of the bigger screen is something called Discover Pro Navigation. And that just basically means there's better navigation in there. There's better sound options. It's just upgraded software to work with the bigger screen. Under the bonnet, we've got a 2-liter engine. It's pretty standard Volkswagen engine, produces 162 kilowatts and 350 Newton meters of torque, which actually in this car is a really, really good sort of power and torque placement. It's not ridiculously quick, but it's not underpowered either. It's not a very heavy car, so it feels nippy. It gets from 0 to 100 in about 6.8 seconds. And if you kept your foot down while you're doing your 0 to 100 run, you'd get all the way to about 220 kilometers an hour, which is quick. And performance figures of this car far outweigh what you'd actually ever use this car for. It is a family car. It is not a performance car. Got a 7-speed DSG gearbox, and with that come the sort of flappy paddle options behind the steering wheel. They're quite small. You can only just see them sort of peeping above the steering wheel. There's a little minus sign on the left, which is for gearing down, and on the right there's a plus sign, which is for gearing up. It also says off on the right hand paddle. If you hold that down for a couple of seconds, it actually disables the manual mode and puts you back into the DSG driving mode. So the first thing you notice when you get into the car is that it's completely keyless. What this means is you just walk up to the door, you reach out and you pull on the door with the key in your pocket, and the door unlocks and the door opens at the same time. It also comes with an automatic boot opening feature. So you just kind of swing your leg underneath the bumper and the boot opens. Once again, as long as the key is in your pocket. Very useful if you've got hands full of groceries or shopping or boxes or anything you need to put on the boot and you don't want to put them down or you can't put them down and you just kind of need the boot to be open already. You can just walk up to it, swing your foot under there, and the boot will just pop right up. Then to close the boot, there is a button at the top. You press that and the boot closes automatically. You then get in the car, and one of the first things you notice is that the key itself has a sort of key which folds out, and that's pretty standard for Volkswagen keys. But there's nowhere to put the key in. And in this press car, you can actually see there are quite a few scratches where people clearly in the past have tried to sort of wedge a key in there just purely out of habit. To start the car, though, in the center console, there's a button that says start engine, stop engine, and that's what you press. Foot on the brake, press the button, and that's how you start the car. If the key's not in the car won't start. As I mentioned earlier, the car is 4Motion, so it's all-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive. It does have a controller in the center, which allows you to kind of do snow and mud, gravel off-road, uphills, and tar, It's all electronic. There's no sort of manual diff lock option, so it's not a hardcore 4x4 car. But I have no doubt that it is an incredibly capable car on relatively difficult surfaces. So if you find yourself on a road that's quite slippery and you need extra traction, you can do that. The car will electronically decide which wheel needs the traction, and it'll do so in like nanoseconds as well. So if one of the wheels loses the traction, all the power gets shifted and balanced across the wheels that do have traction in sort of whatever amounts of the traction that they need there. So this car runs on 19-inch alloys. It kind of suits the car because it's a little bit bigger than the normal Tiguan is. So having a look at the cockpit, you've fully electronic windows on all four windows. You've got your mirror adjustments. You've got your lock, unlock buttons here, door levers. On the right, you've got your light adjustments. It does have automatic lights. You can kind of turn your lights on, and they'll always be on when you drive. And then the minute you stop the car and lock the car, it'll turn the lights off. To the left of that is the head-up display function. That's where you can sort of turn the head-up display on and off, and it sort of arrives above you here. You have a virtual cockpit, which means there are no analog dials behind the steering wheel. This is quite cool. So that's just one really big screen, and that's all controlled with the steering wheel. So on the right-hand side of the steering wheel, you have these buttons which allow you to kind of flick through different pages of settings, and then up and down buttons which let you go through the options on that specific page. There's a big OK button in the middle for selection. There's also a phone button. That's when you can answer calls and hang up calls. And there's a voice button here, which allows you to kind of activate the voice system in the car and speak commands to the car and get it to do stuff. Below that is the sort of skip back and skip forward buttons. So whatever audio you're playing, those buttons will control skipping audio forward and back by sort of one track. The left-hand side of the steering wheel, you have all your cruise control stuff. This Tiguan has radar-guided cruise control. So you've got your set and your normal limits, and you can turn it on and off. You can set cruise control to be so like 100 kilometers an hour. And then the minute you activate radar-guided cruise control, you can turn it on. You can then set how far behind the car in front of you want to stay. So that can be 1 second, 2 seconds, and 3 seconds. If the car in front of you reduces its speed to below whatever speed you've set, the Tiguan will automatically slow down and drive at that speed. If the car ahead of you is going faster than the speed that you've set, it'll automatically go to the speed that you've set and it'll stay there. That'll be the preference. And that's all controlled off the left here. And then below that are the volume buttons for the radio. The center, you've got your sort of air vents at the top and your air control. You've got this 9.2-inch screen. I'll go through all the details on the screen now. There's a menu button, a home button, power button. There's no volume control. There's no like little button you can turn to change the volume. There are only those up and down plus and minus buttons. Below the screen, you've got your climate control. So it shows you, it's dual climate control. So it shows you the temperature on the passenger side and the temperature on the driver's side. You've got your heated seats buttons. Both passenger and driver get heated seats. There's a sync button. If you press that, the rear, passenger, and driver side climates are all synced to whatever the driver has set. So whatever temperature you've got on the driver's side is what it'll choose. And then below that, you've got this little storage bin, which is big enough for a phone or two. It's ruggedized on the inside, so it's quite grippy. There's a 12-volt charging socket. It's not a lighter socket. It's just a charging socket. It's kind of got a little flap over it. There are two USB ports which activate CarPlay as well as charge your phone when plugged in. And then there is an audio jack. So if you have a device that, for instance, doesn't work via USB, let's say an old iPod or something like that, you can actually get a mini jack to mini jack cable and you can jack it in there and still play the audio through the car. So quite versatile in terms of sort of options in the front there. It's got the DSG gearbox lever in the front here with your usual array of park, reverse, neutral, drive, and if you kick it to the left, the sport option. On the left-hand side, you've got your start-stop system on and off. If you turn the start-stop system off, it will only stay off until the next time that you start the car again. So you can't deactivate it entirely. Below that, you've got the parking assist. I'll show you how that works in a minute. And you've got your parking sensors, which you can turn off. I advise against that unless you are completely stationary and you know for a fact that the beeping noise is just unnecessary and it's driving you mad. But if you are moving, leave it on and just try and move away from the damn object that's beeping at you in the first place. The right hand side is got an electronic park brake. You pull it up to turn it on, you push it down to turn it off. It disengages automatically when you drive. So you get in the car, you start the car, you put it in drive, you step on the accelerator, and the handbrake disengages automatically. So you don't kind of have to turn it off every single time. Below that, there's an auto hold feature. The auto hold feature prevents the car from rolling back if you're on a hill. This is more useful if you're in a manual, for instance, and you're sitting on a steep hill, you're trying to do that whole sort of clutch control thing where you're bound to roll back. The auto hold feature will hold you for about 3 to 4 seconds before it lets go and rolls back. It's enough time for you to get onto the accelerator and get the car moving forward. And then there's the traction control off button, which in this car you'll probably never use unless you're off-road and you're a little bit stuck, you need to turn something like that. Stability control, etc., all lives over there. Then below the gear lever is the off-road control function, which I've covered already. Then there's this really cool binnacle in the center, which sort of slides up and down. If you slide it closed, it's kind of it's just a solid area you can put something on. If you slide it open, you can actually store stuff in there, or you can turn it into sort of a cup holder function. So it's got these two things that slide out. If you press the button, they both sort of come out and you have two cup holders. It's useful and big enough to kind of store a phone in, or store your wallet in, or store some keys in, or something like that. And then at the press of a button, you can turn it into cup holders. The center armrest has sort of that ratcheting function. So if you lift it up all the way and then drop it, it goes all the way down. Then as you pick it up, you can kind of feel it ratcheting, and you kind of select the height you want it at, push it down slightly, and it locks. And that's where you can then rest your arm. Below that, there's a bit of a storage compartment, big enough for small water bottle, your wallet, maybe your phone, bunch of keys, stuff like that. The driver's side seat is completely electronic. Does lumbar support, does sort of the leg support, moves forwards, backwards, up, down, backrest, the whole 9 yards. There's also a memory setting, so you can store up to 3 different seating positions on the front seat, depending on who gets in and who's driving the car. Tied to that is a function that when you start the car, there are driver profiles that can be saved on the system. So you can actually save driver profiles under different people's names, and you can set the car up for those people. So if you get in the car, you select your name, and then sort of all the settings and the setup, the way you like the screen to look and everything to work, all that kind of kicks in. When your partner gets in and they turn the car on, they select their name, then the car automatically adjusts to all their settings and the way they like it. That's quite cool. So it's kind of taking that seating thing to like another level. The passenger seat, though, has none of that, for whatever that's worth. At the back, you have climate control where the back passengers can select their own temperature. They have a 12-volt charging socket. They have a single USB port that does not activate CarPlay. The rear passengers have a center armrest that folds down. There are just 2 cup holders in there. Nothing fancy, no buttons or any kind of controls of any kind. I want to take you through the sort of center console over here. There is a menu button, and that gives you a whole bunch of menu items. This screen is changeable by just flicking your hand, and you can kind of swipe through it with gestures, which is quite cool. You select radio, the radio functions, media functions, navigation, etc. What is particularly interesting on the next page is air conditioning. You can, under the air conditioning, sync the entire car to be at the same temperature. So as I adjust it, you can see it goes down. You can lock the rear temperature so that children cannot change the temperature back there. My kids are notorious for doing that kind of thing and making it like 30 degrees in the back when it's like 16 degrees in the front. So as I mentioned earlier, it is a 7-seater. Now, if you have the 7 seats folded down, you have about 700 liters of boot space here. So it's a big boot. But it's quite easy to just sort of pop the seats up. You reach them from behind, pull it, bang, seats in place. Pull the other one, bang, seats in place. If you're from behind trying to put stuff in the boot and the seats are up, but nobody's there, you just pull these 2 levers, pop them down, and you're back into the boot. So deploying the 7 seats is actually really, really easy. Obviously, to gain access to the 7 seats, you'd fold the one front seat forward, somebody would climb over. It's not huge. I mean, we're not talking 6 foot people in the back here, but one or two small kids quite easily. And that wraps it up for the Tiguan ALLSPACE. It's actually a lot of car for the money. It's spacious, it's comfortable, it's got a ton of electronics. It's really, really cool.